Raymond P. Sports presents championship drag racing from the National Hot Rod Association. The NHRA Winston World Finals. Orange County International Raceway in Irvine, California. I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and this is a Top Fuel dragster.
The modern-day Top Fuel dragster, Dave, 1,500 pounds, some 3,000 horsepower of nitro-burning, supercharged Hemi engines. They are the fastest accelerating vehicles in the world today, and a world champion will be crowned here today at Orange County International Raceway, also in funny car and in pro stock. It's the end of a 12-event nationwide tour.
Starting action off in the first round of Top Fuel Eliminator, we have got one of the top female drivers in the business, Lucille Lee, matched up against Dublin, Ohio's Jim Head. Quite a story on Jim Head. He came up from the ranks of the amateur racer and has worked his way all the way up to Top Fuel and is qualified for this World Championship Finals.
And an incredible story on Lucille Lee, Dave. She never drove anything but the push truck until about a year and a half ago when she was tutored by Mark Danicus right here at OCIR and learned to drive a Top Fuel dragster. She has already won one national event.
Jim Head in the far lane. Lucille Lee up in smoke. Too much power, no traction, and it is Jim Head with an upset win in the first round. 5.90 seconds elapsed time. His speed over 231 miles an hour, and a tough break for Lucille Lee.
Mark Danicus apparently just putting too much power in the engine of Lucille and overpowered the track, lost traction, and that race went up in smoke for Lucille Lee here in first round Top Fuel action.
Back to the starting line, and the burnouts continuing as our next pair of cars. Jody Smart from San Antonio, Texas, will be racing against Ernie Hall out of Cornelius, Oregon.
Jody Smart is a speed equipment wholesaler in Texas who has campaigned the national trail now for 2 consecutive years. He's been runner-up twice, but yet to win that first national event. Ernie Hall is a hobby racer from Oregon. He builds fire trucks, David, for a living, and beautiful trucks they are, much like this Top Fuel dragster. Very clean and sanitary all the time.
Jody Smart has been knocking on the door of a major championship for some time. For Ernie Hall, his hobby racing has always stood him in good stead. He's qualified at most events that he goes to. He's upgraded his equipment every year, and Ernie Hall now matched up against Jody Smart in round number 1 at the Winston World Finals.
Now, Jody Smart in the near lane is famous for a big top-end charge. Goes over 250 miles an hour just about every pass.
The overflow crowd in Orange County watching as Jody Smart pulls away from Ernie Hall at the start, and he extends his lead at the finish line. Jody Smart wins it. 5.76 seconds elapsed time. His speed over 250 miles an hour.
Losing 5.97 for Ernie Hall at 246 miles an hour. Our next pair coming to the line right now, David, it'll be Doug Krahulis of Bakersfield, California. This is Dangerous Doug in the near lane. In the far lane will be former U.S. national champion Terry Camp of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
The name Doug Krahulis is almost legend around drag racing, not only for his exploits on the racetrack, but off. He's quite a personality, Steve.
Terry Cap, the past few seasons, has run the entire national event trail, but this year has stayed pretty close to home. This is only the second time that we have seen Terry Cap from Edmonton.
Krahulis out of Bakersfield, California, has had a very successful season in his measurement standards, and that is how many events does he qualify for and how well does he qualify. I think he's made it in the field for every national event that he has competed at this season and has qualified much higher than he did the year before.
As they move forward, the Christmas tree starting system will stage them. There'll be a flash of yellow, then the green light, and the race will be on here in round 1, Top Fuel action, the Winston World Finals.
Both cars leaving almost together, but Terry Camp appears to be pulling out at the finish line, and he does. Terry Camp wins it with a 5.95 second elapsed time to a losing 6 seconds flat.
Doug Krahulis will be very disappointed at 6 seconds flat, 245 miles an hour. The reaction time was absolutely identical for both drivers. Here now, as round 1 action continues, this is Connie Colita. He has won 2 national events this year, his first in almost 15 years of drag racing out of Ypsilanti, Michigan.
His competition comes from Whittier, California. This is a driver that has bounced around from several cars and is now at the wheel of this Top Fuel dragster, Dave Braskett. He used to campaign a funny car with a partner by the name of Gary Bergen, who is certainly a force to be reckoned with in funny car racing. Dave Braskett taking over the driving chores of the R.J. Trotter machine. He's on the far side of the racetrack as they leave the starting lineup. Look at Kalita go.
Kalita came here as a two-car team. His young son Scott failed to qualify, but Connie Kalita picks up the win light in round one at 571, 236 miles an hour. Dave Braskett, a hobby racer really here at Orange County International Raceway, 615, only 201 miles per hour.
Interesting thing about Braskett, he's driving the car that was the low qualifier at the start of the season, the first race of the year at the Winter Nationals. That time driven by an Australian.
Well, speaking of low qualifiers, this blue car with the number 2 on the side is Gary Beck. Gary Beck owns the 4 quickest elapsed times in drag racing history. The all-time quickest coming this year at the U.S. Nationals at 5.48 seconds.
His competition in the far lane is Frank Bradley, a former Winter Nationals champion. Bradley out of Napa, California, turned pro a few years ago. Gary Beck, driving the Larry Minor owned and operated car, is regarded former 2-time national champion. He is the former world champion, was number 2 in the world last season, and regarded by many as one of the premier drivers in the sport.
This is the burnout. It is all important for the Top Fuel dragsters and the funny cars. You see the tires grow as Gary Beck puts the hammer down to heat up these 18-inch wide tires, make them hot, sticky, and also to lay down a hot path of rubber on the racetrack. The car is backed up in stage in those burnout tracks.
They use a puddle of water to start the burnout, something just to break the tires loose. It looks like a crewman working on Frank Bradley's car, but I guess everything's okay because here comes Gary Beck into the staging beams. This is the quickest Top Fuel dragster in the world, the car of Gary Beck.
Hey, David, the front wheel has come off of Frank Bradley's car. The left front wheel rolled right off of the car. Bradley crossing the center line, which automatically disqualifies him. Gary Beck will win the race at 5.69, 245 miles an hour. And here you can see the front wheel is gone.
Just off the car completely, and Frank Bradley bringing the car to a safe stop. As we watch again, you see both cars coming off the starting line. A great start for Bradley. And then all of a sudden, some vibration sets in, and there's the wheel rolling off across the track behind Gary Beck's car.
There was no unusual abuse on the front end whatsoever. It just came off.
Our next pair of cars into the water, and then out with smoking tires.
In the far lane is John Kimball of Compton, California. Here you see John, a trucking company operator in the local Southern California area. He is up against a machine shop owner from the Northwest Portland, Oregon, Big Jim Bernard, who has traveled this entire 12-event circuit this year and has done quite well performance-wise, but just has not quite well enough, David.
His crew chief, Lee Beard, in checking over the car. I tell you, this has been a rather surprising car to a lot of people this season because Bernard normally races up in the Northwest, but he decided, let's go on tour this year, and he has surprised a lot of people.
All right, Kimball is away from the mark first, but suddenly we see oil, and then the oil is ignited by the header flames. A brief fire. Kimball is okay and shuts it off. Bernard wins it at 581, 238 miles an hour, but that's what 12 quarts of drag racing oil looks like on fire.
That's right. As the engine expired in John Kimball's car, you could just see the smoke coming out of it. This is Shirley Muldowney, and the results of this next race could have a definite bearing on the world champion title. She's currently leading, but the driver of this car, Mark Oswald, driving for Candies and Hughes, has a mathematical chance of catching her. Mark, taking over the driving chores this season, is matched up here in the first round against Joe Amato from Old Forge, Pennsylvania, a racer that has converted from alcohol-style racing to Top Fuel with great success.
Amato here with the chrome roll bar. Now we'll get a look at the famed Candies and Hughes car. This is the last event ever, they say, for this car. They are retiring from Top Fuel Racing. Got to go to the funny cars. It is the world record holder at 256 miles an hour. That's in the near lane, Mark Oswald.
And it appeared to be a bit of a hole shot for Joe Amato, and he is holding on to the lead and extending it, and what an upset. Joe Amato defeating Mark Oswald in the first round, and that gives the World Championship win to Shirley Muldowney. Steve?
I'm very proud. I'm very, very happy. The car had a lot to do with it. You know, Pioneer had a lot to do with it, but the people that build and maintain the car, Ron, Pat, my son John, they are in really a class by themselves.
What an upset. Joe Amato defeats Mark Oswald. Oswald now out of the running for the World Championship. Shirley, the Winston World Champion for the third time.
And David, now that Shirley has that Winston $40,000 worth of bonus money in her purse, now she'll contest for the event title worth another $25,000. The pink car, the Pioneer Stereo Special. She'll be up against the runner-up for the event title here 1 year ago, Dwight Salisbury, in the Whiting and Markley car from Washington State.
In the near lane, it is Shirley, but this is Dwight Salisbury, regarded by many as one of the best on the starting line. But of course, Shirley is the premier Top Fuel dragster driver in the world today. And here at the World Finals, she has just proven it again as she leaves ahead of Dwight Salisbury.
She's running away from him, David. 5.72, 248 miles an hour. The crew in celebration.
Oh, look at the bright pink balloons going up over Orange County International Raceway here in Irvine, California, as this Southern California crowd treated to some exciting racing as Shirley Muldowney climbs out of her car, a first-round victor. She has a shot at this event title. We've taken a look back at how she earned her way to her third World Championship, and Steve, you have the story.
Now, along the way, those 4 national event victories, let's take a look at 3 of the most interesting ones. First, in Gainesville, Florida, it was you and Big Daddy in the final round. Don Garlett's an old nemesis for you.
He simply just wasn't up to par. It was a race that he wanted to attend because it was in his backyard, and he hadn't been on the NHRA circuit for a lot of years, and for reasons of his own. Some may be good, a lot of them were bad, but he was there nonetheless, and we went up alongside of each other in the final, and it was a lot of tension, and it was a race that he will never forget. I think the race that he will never forget.
The Spring Nationals, the press had a field day with an all-female final. Yourself, Lucille Lee.
It was a historic day, and it was a good day for the women. It was my day. We happened to set Lowy Lab's time the last round, and we won the race.
Okay, let's move along to the U.S. Nationals, the biggest personal victory, I think, for you ever, right? You and Connie Kalita in the final.
Yes, but everyone wants to be in the final at Indy, and, first we thought Gainesville was the greatest. Nothing could top that because of the old man. Then, nothing could top Columbus because of the style we won it, a lot of style. Then we went to Indy, and that would have to be the greatest race of my life. It will always be the biggest thrill I've ever had in racing.
And Kalita didn't give up easily, did he?
No, he deserved everything that he got that day, and if I had blinked, he would have won the race. But as it goes, we happened to come out on top.
And as we speak, there's a motion picture company here at Orange County creating or recording the life story of Shirley Muldowney, a movie on your life.
And they're having a lot of fun doing it, too. They got to know a lot about the sport before they actually went into the project, and that was good for them. And all the racers, everybody involved in the sport has been very cooperative, and I'm very thankful for that. It proves one thing. We have a lot of friends here.
You bet you do. And the name of this film is Heart Like a Wheel. That's appropriate, because this lady's got a lot of heart.
A great retrospective, Steve, and why don't I ever get the kisses? Maybe it's because I sit here in the booth all the time and you get out in the field, and where we are now is back on the starting line as number 2 in the world last season. Gary Beck comes up to race against Terry Kapp. We're into round number 2 racing at the Winston World Finals in Top Fuel Eliminator. Steve, let's find out why Terry Kapp isn't running.
Gary Beck got a gift, but I understand he offered to loan you a motor to race him with.
You bet. Larry Miner was the first guy over here and says, what happened? I says, we broke a brake. He says, well, you fix your motor, I'll get you a new one. He came back with a new brake, and I says, hey, we blackened the crank. He says, I got 2 on the floor. If you want one, you come and get it. You put your stuff on top, and we'll race you. I says, thanks, but we'll give you the single.
And that is a big break in a highly competitive race such as this one. The Winston World Finals, and Gary Beck here in round number 2 gets an easy go. But will he take it easy, Steve?
I don't think he will, Dave. Lane choice, very important. Now, you saw Beck smoke the tires. He's very good at pedaling the car, getting on and off the throttle very quickly. And he still comes up with a tremendous 5.62 at over 242 miles an hour.
The 5.62 thus far is the quickest elapsed time in eliminations, and Gary Beck smoked the tires off the starting line. This is Connie Kalita. In round number 2 racing, Kalita comes up against Jody Smart out of San Antonio, Texas.
It was Jody Smart who put away in the first round of competition Oregon's Ernie Hall. Now Jody is in the right-hand lane, Kalita here in the tower lane. Kalita is comfortable behind the controls of a Learjet as he is in a Top Fuel dragster. He owns a flying service in the Detroit, Michigan area.
This year already, Connie Kalita finished runner-up at the U.S. Nationals, but he smokes the tires here, and the motor goes away for Jody Smart, but Smart legs it through and takes the win with a very slow 6:03, but it doesn't matter. He got there first. As we watch again, you see they're fairly closely matched within a few feet, but there the smoke starts, indicating a loss of traction.
And I'm sure Jody Smart kept waiting for Kalita to come around him, unknowing that the tires were just blazing on Kalita's car. And Jody Smart appears to have a little oil running out of his machine as well.
As you saw the motor go away for Jody Smart as he came towards the finish line. This is Jim Bernard, the Northwind car out of Oregon. Rolling out of the water and then smoking those tires on the burnout, as every car does in competition.
He will be up against in the far lane Jim Head of Dublin, Ohio. This is Jim Head. He's a graduate engineer, has experimented with computers mounted on this car, David. I don't know if they're there today or not.
And Jim Bernard, as we told you earlier, has been campaigning throughout the year on all of the NHRA national event sites and has done exceptionally well.
Now, Jim Head is the first to pre-stage. You see in the right lane. Now, Bernard with the top yellow light on. Bernard is ready, and Head is ready.
The light goes green, and it is Jim Head streaking away from the starting line. Head with almost 0.2 of a second advantage off the starting line, and folks, that's what's called a hole shot.
But, as you can see, it was Jim Bernard had the power to come from behind at 591, 234 miles an hour. He is going to have to tune up his starting line reflexes for sure.
Our final pair already fired in this second round of racing as the crowd coming to their feet to watch the new Winston World Champion here in the near lane, Shirley Muldowney, square off against Joe Amato. Joe Amato was the man that gave her that world championship, by the way.
He certainly was, and he got a lot of congratulations for it and thanks for it at the far end of the racetrack. It was Amato that put out Mark Oswald, the only driver coming in here to the Winston World Finals that had a shot at Shirley. But now it's the pink car here in the near lane. Shirley Muldowney intently watching that Christmas tree. They're pre-stage. Shirley's ready. Amato's ready. And Shirley leaves too soon.
It's a red light start, and when that red light comes on, it means just what Steve told you. You left too soon. She pulled away from the starting line too quickly, and that gives Joe Amato his second upset win of this event. Let's watch it again. You see right there, Shirley moves way too quickly. She was really dialed into the tree, but somewhere along the way, the timing went away.
Too much anticipation, David. I wonder if she's not still thinking about winning that world title. Might have taken her mind off of that race a little bit.
Certainly takes the pressure off just a little bit. The mountains overlooking Orange County International Raceway, looking down on a huge crowd of people watching this Winston World Finals as we get set for Pro Stock.
That's right. The Top Fuel car is getting ready for their semifinal round. Now it's Pro Stock. The factory hot rods. These are 7-second, 170-mile-an-hour machines, and here is the world champion, Lee Shepard, the Rear and Morrison Camaro from Arlington, Texas. They clinched the world championship at mid-season. They had amassed so many victories in Winston points.
The competition for Lee Shepard is another Camaro and a very famous name. This is Lee Shepard. He drives for the team of Rear and Morrison out of Arlington, Texas. But his competition moving up from the modified ranks, this is Joe Lapone Jr. driving for the one, the only Bill Grumpy Jenkins. Lapone, formerly a modified racer, now wheeling this 170-mile-an-hour Pro Stocker with a lot of class.
David Rear, one of the car owners, looking on as Lee Shepard prepares to stage the car. He's ready, Lapone is ready, and we've got a beautiful race. Lapone is out first over Rear and Morrison. But here comes the famed Texas horsepower on the big end.
And does it pay off? A 0.04 of a second hole shot by Joe Lapone. He did exactly what he's hired to do, but the horsepower difference was more than made up for as David Rear and Buddy Morrison field another round win for their driver, Lee Shepard.
In the second half of the semifinals here in Pro Stock, we'll see this man, Bob Glidden, the 5-time world champion from Whiteland, Indiana, the Ford EXP, up against the amazing Oldsmobile driver from Norcross, Georgia. This is Warren Johnson, who came on very strong the latter half of the season. It's a good thing Lee Shepard wrapped it up early, David.
Certainly is, because W.J. Warren Johnson knocks on that 180-mile-an-hour door practically every time he goes down the racetrack. They're staging carefully, and a red light start for Glidden. He leaves too quickly. You saw it a moment ago with Shirley, and now Bob Glidden falls prey to the red light.
Glidden just rolled the dice. He had to try to leave on Johnson as Johnson thunders to a 775, 178 miles an hour. Here's Glidden again. You see the tree in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, and Glidden moves before the yellow light goes out.
That's a red light, and that's a lose, and this man, Warren Johnson, is moved into the finals to race against the Chevrolet of Rare and Morrison.
Back to Top Fuel, second round. It will be Jody Smart here with the orange helmet in the far lane, up against the world's quickest driver in car, the Larry Minor entry from Hemet, California. Gary Beck at the wheel, the event champion right here at OCIR a year ago, and it's Beck out first.
Oh, and the world's quickest Top Fuel dragster is proving it once again. Gary Beck streaks across the finish line with a 5.71 second elapsed time. His speed 245 miles an hour, a losing 598, 0.2 of a second, and it looked like a train link between them, Steve.
It certainly did. Up next will be Jim Bernard, the car called the Northwind from Portland, Oregon, up against Joe Amato in the right-hand lane.
Joe Amato has had the role of the spoiler thus far at this event. Let's see how far he can go. Steve's with Gary Beck right now.
Yeah, it's good. The car's shaking a little bit out there, but it's getting down the track. So we're glad to be here. It's, you know, close to home, a couple miles from hometown, home city for Larry Minor. We're glad to be here.
I'm sure Gary Beck is. He's got low elapsed time of the meet in eliminations thus far with that outstanding 5.62. That's smoking the tires. But that was history. This is present tense, and this is current time. Jim Bernard against Joe Amato.
And Jim Bernard has had to come from behind the previous two rounds, and he's going to have to do it again. A big hole shot for Joe Amato. Amato's going to win. No, he's not going to win.
Oh, what a close race, and it looked like in just the last few inches, Jim Bernard streaked past Joe Amato to take the victory. Joe Amato, as we said earlier, cast in the role of the spoiler. He does a tremendous driving job here. His car responds perfectly. He's got 0.06 of a second hole shot on Jim Bernard. But watch now as Bernard comes on with a horsepower at the finish line, 250 miles an hour, to pass Joe Amato and take the victory. Jim Bernard, coming out of his helmet and his fire suit, is in the finals against Gary Beck, and he has got to be wondering how's his car going to fare against that vehicle that has low elapsed time, and it also has got the quickest elapsed time in the history of the sport. We'll be finding out very shortly as we get set to go now with the finals of Pro Stock.
Oh, the crowd is on their feet for this one. It's Chevrolet in the far lane, Lee Shepard, Oldsmobile in the tower lane, the national record holder for speed, Warren Johnson. The two have met, I believe, 3 times this year, and Johnson has won twice. They stage very, very carefully. These are 4-speed transmission cars. It is Warren Johnson out first. It is Warren Johnson out ahead of Lee Shepard. It is Johnson driving away at 7.78 seconds, 176 miles an hour, to a fairly close 786 at 177.
So as you can see, Steve, coming into the finish line, speed traps, and then across the finish line by a little over a car length, it is WJ, that's that man, Warren Johnson and his Oldsmobile, defeating the Winston World Champion for the event title. As we move into Top Fuel Eliminator, the winner of this will also take home the event title. Jim Bernard against Gary Beck.
Jim Bernard's first ever final round appearance in major NHRA competition. Gary Beck, who at this point seems to be unstoppable, but if you look back over the season, Beck seems to always have some kind of problem. Lady Luck has not been with the Larry Minor crew this year. It has certainly been there as far as elapsed times are concerned, but they have not won a race all year, looking to make it 2 in a row here at the World Finals.
Bernard is in the far lane, and here's Gary Beck smoking the tires, and it is Bernard streaking ahead across the finish line. Jim Bernard, exploding an engine, takes the win. His elapsed time only 5.92 seconds, but as Jim Bernard would tell you, who cares? The point is, he got there before Gary Beck, and that means Jim Bernard is the NHRA Winston World Finals champion. Steve?
This man has been racing for 15 years, waiting for this moment, and anytime you're up against Gary Beck, there's always the chance that he may make too much power. And Jim, I think that's what happened. He smoked the tires.
He smoked the tires. I didn't know what happened. He was there for a second and then gone. I knew I had my hands full. She went to the right, and then she went, and it shook, did everything it wasn't supposed to do. I didn't know how I won the race, but we did it.
He certainly did it from Portland, Oregon. Jim Bernard, the Top Fuel champion at the Winston World Finals. We've also crowned our Pro Stock champ, Warren Johnson, but there's more to come, the funny cars.
Last year, David, here at the Winston World Finals, we saw three of the most terrifying fires in drag racing history. First, it was Gary Densham to light up, flames literally surrounding the car and melting the fiberglass body. Then it was Texan Billy Meyer on fire at the finish line, the parachutes burning off the car, the fiberglass starting to melt around Billy Meyer. Then, four-time world champion Don the Snake Prudhomme, the most terrifying ride of his 20-year drag racing career. Hard to believe that all three of these men walked away from these fires and are competing here today in round one of funny car competition.
Not only are all three competing in the first round, but two of these racers, Billy Meyer and Don Prudhomme, are in the thick of the hunt for that Winston World Champion title here at the World Finals.
But they'll have to contend with Frank Hawley, who has the points lead. Here's round one action. This is the Chief Auto 711 car in the near lane with Trip Shoemaker, Phoenix, Arizona at the wheel.
And Tim Gross in the Datsun 280 ZX bodied car. Gross transplanted from California to Michigan and now back in California again. For Trip Shoemake, he is driving a team car. There's actually two of these cars, one driven by Billy Meyer, the other by Trip Shoemake.
Trip Shoemake in the Ford EXP bodied car that is actually Billy Meyer's new car for '83. Meyer is using Trip Shoemake as a blocker here, hoping that Trip can get to Frank Hawley and Don Prudhomme early in the going.
And if so, that will allow Billy Meyer to move into that Winston World Champion title. It gets rather complex because there are four drivers who are capable of winning it at this event.
Trip Shoemake here in the tower lane, and Trip Shoemake is away first. Trip Shoemake with far more power than that of the Datsun car of Tim Gross. It is Trip Shoemake getting there at a beautiful 583. 232 miles an hour. So the little rented driver from Phoenix, Arizona, so far doing the job he was hired to do by Billy Meyer.
And that is winning the race and advancing into the next round. Eventually, he will have to match up against one of those drivers that is in the chase for the Winston World Champion title.
Beautiful funny car here in the near lane as the 82 Camaro body goes down over the chassis of Bruce Iverson. Iverson's from Southern California. He is up against Salt Lake City's Garth Whittison, and both of these are really kind of unknown quantities. They seldom really qualify for national event competition. Look at this beautiful Camaro, David.
This low-slung car surprised everybody by running in the 5-second bracket in qualifying and moved up into the upper half of the field. In other words, cars 1 through 8. And shuffled the field around a little bit right at the very end of qualifying, and that surprised everybody.
The funny cars accomplishing their tires smoking, ground, pound, and burnouts. One thing that has made them so popular with fans all over the country. They use essentially the same kind of nitro-burning engine as we saw in Top Fuel, except here the engine is in front of the driver. They're a much shorter wheelbase, plus they have the fiberglass replica bodies draped over the sophisticated chassis. You're looking at $60,000, $70,000 worth of rolling drag racing stock here.
Garth Whittison driving the Battlestar car. There can't be that many funny cars in the state of Utah, Steve.
I believe he's the only competitive one, David.
Well, he is very competitive because he just left Bruce Iverson sitting in the blower, comes apart. Something comes off of the car of Bruce Iverson, and Garth Whittison wins the race. Whittison coming in with an elapsed time of 6:43, not competitive by any stretch of the imagination.
Here is the car that has the lead for the World Championship. The Chi-Town Hustler. Frank Hawley for Pat Minnick out of Chicago, Illinois. Garth Whittison being pushed off the racetrack down at the far end. But Frank Hawley, who has won, 3 national events so far this year?
He'll be racing against Al Segrini. Segrini, winner of the Winter Nationals, the first race of the year, has got his work cut out for him because Frank Hawley has been on a roll all season long. Everybody said, this is basically an exhibition car. They can't make it through a whole series and season of competitive racing, but look at this.
Yeah, everybody said they don't have enough money, enough parts. Al Segrini, now that's one of those $250,000 18-wheelers. Segrini over in the far lane. The Chi-Town car has an old ramp-back truck with about 500,000 miles on it, but the young Canadian driver, Frank Hawley, has done a tremendous job. Austin Coyle setting his driver here in the near lane. They feel they've won the World Championship, but they're just not counting their chickens quite yet.
He pulls away from Al Segrini. Frank Hawley increases his lead in the middle of the course. Segrini's engine goes away, and Frank Hawley wins it.
At 5.93 seconds, 241 miles an hour, Frank Hawley picks up some badly needed points to hold off Billy Meyer and the Snake.
The eliminations in a drag racing program are in single elimination style like a basketball tournament. If you win, you advance to the next round, and Here's the man everybody's been waiting to see, the quickest funny car in the history of drag racing, Don the Snake Prudhomme in the near lane.
Earlier in our telecast, you saw the Snake melt the Pepsi Challenger from last year. Here is Frank Hawley coming out of the car. He was very nervous young man going into round one. Now maybe some of those butterflies will go away as the helmet of the mask comes off.
Our Diamond B camera is right on top of the action for Don Prudhomme. He had the most incredible time of his life at Indianapolis at the U.S. Nationals with a 5:63 elapsed time. He is racing the Pisano car. Joe Pisano is the car owner. Craig Epperly, the driver, here at the World Finals out of Downey. And look at Prudhomme go.
Oh, Prudhomme is laying one down as getting very close to the rail was Craig Epperly. It is Don Prudhomme at a 6.03, 241 miles an hour. Prudhomme picks up another 200 valuable Winston points. He's still got a backdoor shot at this world title.
And for Prudhomme, I'm sure he's not going to be happy with the performance. The car left the starting line very well, but it certainly didn't perform in the middle of the course as he expected it to do.
This is Raymond Beadle, who at the close of this event will have to scrape that number one off the side of his famous Blue Max and give it to somebody else, either Hawley, Billy Meyer, or Prudhomme. He's up against Gary Bergen, who was in the final round for the event title here a year ago when Big Jim Dunn won that event. Now, Raymond Beadle, the three-time national champion, is not going to make it four in the English Leather Ford EXP. Had a lot of problems. He flipped the car early in the year, then burned one to the ground, and they never quite caught up again.
Raymond coming back into the performance style, though, that he has been accustomed to in the last couple of races and has moved very well in qualifying here at the World Finals. For Gary Bergen, he was a finalist at the U.S. Nationals in the finals and, in fact, won that event a few years ago and would love to shut down Raymond Beadle right now. Boy, this is a close race. At the finish line, it is the Blue Max of Raymond Beadle winning it with a 6.05 second elapsed time. Bergen's losing time, a 6:11.
Both of them at about 238 miles an hour. Actually, Bergen at 237. So Bergen was in that one all the way against the Blue Max.
But for Raymond Beadle, a chance to move up another round and possibly take home the event title here at Orange County International Raceway.
As we continue with round one of funny car action, here's a man that's got them all shaking their heads. David, this is Ken Vaney of Wadsworth, Ohio. His first year of nitro funny car racing. After many years with an alcohol car, he has set the national speed record at 254 miles an hour. He'll be up against the black car in the far lane, Little John Lombardo, who's a terror here all summer long at OCIR.
Out of North Hollywood, California, Lombardo is one of those 5-second funny cars that doesn't travel a whole lot. He stays around home, and there's some problems on the starting line. Look at this. They're backing Ken Vaney up. They're checking something, and he says, okay, bring it up and stage again. That's Starter Buster Couch directing the action. The starting system itself, electronically controlled and operated. All the starter does is throw a switch. A great lead for Lombardo, but boy, look at the horsepower of Ken Vaney as he just blows by Little John to a 6:08 elapsed time, 238 miles an hour.
Little John Lombardo at a 641. It's a good thing Vinny had all that power because he was very late up the starting line. He's only made 15 runs in a nitro-burning funny car. Not quite comfortable yet.
Certainly the talk of the nitro-burning contingent is Ken Vaney, and I know some of the other racers are starting to run Ken Vaney components and complete engines.
Back at the starting line. As funny car competition continues, this is Billy Meyer. We saw his teammate earlier, Trip Shoemake, survive round one. Meyer can only hope that he will do the same. As Frank Hawley is still in the program. Billy Meyer trying to drive around Hawley in the point standings with this, the Pontiac-bodied 711 Chief Auto car. Meyer from Waco, Texas, started funny car racing at 16.
Our defending champion here at the Winston World Finals, this is Big Jim Dunn out of Long Beach, California, a fireman, as noted on the West Coast for driving practically anything. The only man ever to win a national event driving a rear-engine funny car. That came years ago, and today I don't think it's going to be his day as Billy Meyer pulls ahead and wins it, defeating Jim Dunn in this first round of action with a 5:99 elapsed time.
And Big Jim Dunn, always there as he was this time, 6.05. Even though Dunn has very little to work with, he was still right there all the time. If Meyer made a mistake, he'd have got him.
Kenny Bernstein and our final pair of funny cars in the first round of action against the man you saw that burned it down a year ago, Gary Dencham. Here's Billy Meyer getting out of his car. He also still in the chase for that Winston World Championship title. Kenny Bernstein actually not in the hunt for the points championship, but he'd sure love to win the event title. Here's the teacher's pet car. He is a teacher, by the way. Teaches school, Gary Densham.
And this was the driver we showed you earlier in the first one of those 3 fires. He back with a beautiful car. Now, Bernstein is on a roll right now. He won the Golden Gate Nationals just a few weeks ago in the San Francisco Bay Area after a ragged early season. Bernstein is back with tremendous performance.
Bernstein and Densham, and look at Bernstein. He is not to be headed in any way in this race as Bernstein crosses the finish line first.
With low ET of eliminations at 5.93 seconds, 246 miles an hour, to Gary Densham's very game 6:15, 233.
So that concludes our first round of racing in Funny Car Eliminator, and we still have those 4 competitors in the thick of it for the Winston World Champion title as Frank Hawley leads in the points. Billy Meyer doing his best to try to catch him. Of course, Don Prudhomme is still in the action, and they've got Trip Shoemake again as a blocker put in the number 2 car by Billy Meyer. And in fact, here's Trip Shoemake.
Indeed it is. Shoemake here in the near lane. Just a couple of weeks ago, his phone rang in Phoenix, Arizona. It was Billy Meyer on the other end of the line saying, "Would you like to drive my car for 2 events?" He didn't hesitate. Trip Shoemake, a former Southern Nationals champion. Now, opposite Shoemake, the consummate funny car racer, the 4-time world champion, Don the Snake Prudhomme, Granada Hills, California. Maybe the best-looking funny car ever built, the Pepsi Challenger Pontiac Firebird.
This car with a 563 to its credit at the U.S. Nationals at Indianapolis Raceway Park has astounded everyone with its performance, but it has been inconsistent. He can run good, but he hurts the car. When he doesn't run so good, the car doesn't get hurt, but he sometimes gets beat. What can happen here? Trip Shoemake is trying to get him, and the engine explodes in Don Prudhomme's car. He's all over his lane, and Trip Shoemake comes home the winner and advances to the semifinals.
As Prudhomme was skating around in his own oil, it was Shoemake at a 6:48, 231 miles an hour. Fortunately for Prudhomme, that happened early on the course, or he could have had a repeat of last year's fire. Here, watch Prudhomme now in the right-hand lane. Probably a connecting rod broke. That's the only thing that will usually put that much oil instantaneously out on the racetrack. Prudhomme doing a very alert job of driving. A lesser driver might have spun that car or even made contact with the rail, David.
Trip Shoemake out of his car, taking off the protective fire gloves, his helmet, and his face mask. He's got to be happy. As Steve told you, it was just a couple of weeks ago he was in retirement. They weren't doing much of anything, and now he is out racing and has worked his way to the semifinals here at the Winston World Finals at Orange County International Raceway. I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and this is the man that is leading the points chase for the Winston World Championship.
You bet it is. It's Frank Hawley, and this is the man who has worn that number 1 for 3 consecutive years. Between he and Prudhomme, it's been 7 years since we've seen anybody else in the Winston winner's circle. Frank Hawley, a likable young guy from London, Ontario, Canada, drove in the alcohol ranks with his own car, actually pleaded and begged for a chance to drive in the big class. He got it. Raymond Beadle, the mustachio driver from Dallas, Texas. He is probably the best financed and maybe the hardest working of all the funny car drivers.
Well, he's got his work cut out for him as Frank Hawley is pulling a big lead. And Frank Hawley, by over a car length, defeats Raymond Beadle, and they continue their march to the Winston World Champion title. Frank Hawley, elapsed time 5:99, his speed over 238 miles an hour, as Billy Meyer showing the pressure, showing the intensity that goes through these drivers' minds as he gets ready to fire up for his next race. Steve takes a look at a comparison between Billy Meyer and Frank Hawley.
This is the funny car racing operation of Texan Billy Meyer, as impressive as you'll find in this sport. Not one race car, but 2, both carrying the logos of many sponsors, affiliated with actor Burt Reynolds and director Hal Needham. The cars are transported in a beautiful 18-wheeler worth at least $250,000. It is jammed to the rafters with spare parts and equipment. Meyer will oversee today a crew of 10 men. He'll make the decisions as to how to tune the engines, but they'll do the heavy work. Talk about your contrast. This is the racing operation of the Chi-Town Hustler team, Frank Hawley's car. An old 1965 truck with 500,000 miles on it. There's no room for many spare parts, but that doesn't matter because they couldn't afford them anyway. What these guys have is talent. Car owner Austin Coyle is as knowledgeable an engine builder and tuner as there is. Hawley, the young Canadian, is not only a fine driver, but is expected to get down on his back between rounds, oil dripping in his face, and service the bearings, the bottom end of the engine.
Billy Meyer, after his crew has put it all together, comes out of the water. He has got to defeat Ken Veeney in this round. Billy Meyer trying to catch Frank Hawley. He is the U.S. Nationals champion, the biggest win of his career for Ken Veeney at over 254 miles an hour, the national record holder, the talk of the sport. Veeney with problems out on the track, and it appears something they can't get it to back up. Steve?
David, apparently the reverser transmission has gone out in Veeney's car, and the rules require that you back these cars up under their own power. You can't just turn it around or you would cross the center line and be out. It's a gift for Billy Meyer.
Oh, what a break for Billy. All he's got to do is keep it between the center line and the guardrails. Don't touch either one, and he did that with ease as Billy Meyer ran 6.09 on a single at over 238 miles an hour. He now moves into the semifinals. Boy, the pressure is on in this world champion chase. The 2,500 horsepower engine of Kenny Bernstein shaking itself to life as crew chief Dale Armstrong turning on the nitrous oxide bottle. A lot of work goes into these cars, and to get two ready for the same round of racing has got to be tough. Steve?
Billy said he's not on a record pace. However, we saw last year when Gary Beck ran the quickest time in drag racing history. If it cools off here later today, maybe.
This track gets very, very good later in the evening as it cools down. Our biggest problem is our motor. We may have to swap motors with the other car. It seems to be running a lot better, but I needed them to mess up, and apparently they're not. So all I can thank is Tripp for taking out Prudhomme, because that at least guaranteed a second so far. So now all we have to do is try to go up.
Right, Billy Meyer, who's got two cars to prepare for the semifinals.
We're into the last race of this quarterfinal round, and it is Garth Whittison out of Utah with the Battlestar car, and I don't think anybody expected to see him here against Kenny Bernstein, the recent winner of the Golden Gate National.
I'll tell you what, Kenny Bernstein, David, as we look over the reaction times that are furnished to us by the NHRA officials, has been super sharp. This is Garth Whittison, the Battlestar. He may have to gamble with a red line here. He's about 2/10 off the pace.
This is Kenny Bernstein, and he's not taking any gamble. He's on a roll right now, and he knows exactly his capabilities and those of his car. His crew chief, Dale Armstrong, has it prepared very well. As we watch him, Kenny into the pre-stage light first in the left-hand lane. Then Garth Whittison pre-stages in the right lane. They're both sitting and waiting. Garth coming into the staging. There's Bernstein, and it's a green light for both cars as they streak away from the starting line.
Again, Bernstein was away first, and look at the power on the top end of the quarter mile. It is Bernstein at 6.08, 237 miles an hour. Garth Whittison just didn't have quite enough in this league at 6:37, 205 miles an hour, but he did qualify, and there's a dozen that can't say that.
That's for sure, and he made it all the way to the second round of the 16-car field here at the Winston World Finals. We're located in Southern California, about 60 miles south of downtown Los Angeles at Orange County International Raceway, and the junction of the freeways, and one of the most popular racetracks in all of the United States, the home of the NHRA Winston World Finals. As we get ready to go into the semifinals, let's go again to Steve with Billy Meyer.
Normally in a semifinal round when you're involved, you don't care about the other run particularly. You're just concentrating on your own. Here, both of them are almost equally important to you.
Very much so, because Tripp's doing an excellent job, and I would like to see it for Hal and for 7-Eleven, and for me and my banker and everybody, us both in the final.
Well, I'm sure Billy Meyer would love to see that, but this is one man he doesn't want to see in the finals, and that is Frank Hawley. Here is Tripp Shoemake, the Team B car. They actually call them the A team and the B team, Steve.
Oh, that's right. Billy calls this the Team B, but they have flown in mechanics from all over the country. Grover Rogers from Texas, Donnie Couch from California, to put together a nucleus with which to get this car ready. Now, here in the tower lane, only one man really works on the car as far as tuning it, and that is the owner, Austin Coyle, we just saw backing up the car. Tripp Shoemake for Billy Meyer. Donnie Couch lining up. Tripp Shoemake. It says Billy Meyer. Don't believe it. It's Shoemake. Here in the near lane, the Bucks Down Chi-Town Hustler, the most amazing story of this 1982 Winston season.
Can he make it pay off all the effort and all the money that Billy Meyer has spent to get Tripp Shoemake into a blocking position? This is the car he has got to block, and Tripp Shoemake is pulling away in the middle of the course, and Tripp Shoemake defeats the points leader in the Winston World Championship points chase. Tripp Shoemake, 6.03, Frank Hawley, a 6.18.
Now it is Tripp Shoemake leaving first by about 2/100ths of a second, and he never looked back. I believe the Chi-Town crew were running a little conservative, didn't want to take a chance of smoking the tires, maybe beat themselves.
Out of the car comes Trip Shoemake. He is in the finals. He goes over to shake the hand of Frank Hawley, and Billy Meyer is sitting back waiting. He knows that he's got the shot at it now because Trip Shoemake has done exactly what he was hired to do, driving that Ford EXP-bodied car to victory over Frank Hawley.
Now it's nervous time for Frank Hawley. Even though he's out of competition, he may still have that world championship. If indeed Billy Meyer can be defeated in this round. If Meyer wins here and wins the race, he could mathematically pick the pocket of Frank Hawley and the popular Chi-Town gang. Kenny Bernstein here in the near lane, a fellow Texan, but right now he'll show no quarter whatsoever. Bernstein, who won, as I mentioned earlier, the Golden Gate Nationals a couple of weeks ago, finished number 3 in the world last year. This is going to be a Texas shootout.
It sure is, and Billy Meyer is coming hot off of that big win at the U.S. Nationals, the most prestigious of them all, certainly the quickest funny car race and qualifying session ever in the history of drag racing. For Bernstein and Meyer, oh, they've chased the whole year. Here's Frank Hawley. Look at him. He can't even stand to watch what's going on up on the starting line, but he's got to turn around and come back, Steve.
Hawley's at the end of the racetrack waiting for the winner, and he hopes that it is not this car, that it's this car, Kenny Bernstein and the Budweiser King. If Bernstein can win here, Frank Hawley will officially fulfill his dream of being the Winston Funny Car World Champion.
A great start for both drivers from this vantage point. It looks like Bernstein, but here comes the Firebird, and who won it? It's hard to say. Oh, the joy on the crew of Frank Hawley tells you Kenny Bernstein was the winner. Steve, they're a happy bunch.
Austin Coyle, his Lady Barbara, Frank Hawley and the crew. A 5-year-old race car. Frank Hawley, the crew of the Chi-Town car, going over to congratulate Kenny Bernstein. 2 weeks ago, at the Golden Gate Nationals, it was Bernstein that defeated Frank Hawley with a hole shot. He wasn't congratulating him then. A wonderful moment for the Chi-Town crew.
An incredibly close race from start to finish. Identical elapsed times, 6.02 seconds. Identical top speeds, 244.54 miles an hour. And at the finish line, it was just a matter of inches as Kenny Bernstein won it. Steve had a chance to ask Kenny how close it really was.
Closest race I've ever had in my life, Steve. I really thought he won. I honestly did. And I never felt that before.
You left first again, as you did on Hawley 2 weeks ago.
Well, I'm taking the right vitamins, I guess.
Well, the right vitamins are sure paying off for Kenny Bernstein today. He is in the finals against Trip Shoemake in the team car of Billy Meyer. And some tremendously close racing has marked this funny car show, and Trip Shoemake has been one of the real stories. A couple of weeks ago, he was in retirement. Steve talked with his wife, Susie.
Well, we just gave up on drag racing. You know, we quit. He'd quit in June. We bought 3-wheel motorcycles. We were out camping during Labor Day weekend. I mean, we're just having a ball. And when Billy Meyer called that morning, we just, you know, that's the best kind of surprises. It's kind of like Christmas morning for us, you know. And this last night was like Christmas Eve for us. You know, you never know what to expect.
We don't know what to expect either as all the work is done. Kenny Bernstein backing into his own tracks. Trip Shoemake in the team car of Billy Meyer alongside of him in the far lane. Bernstein aiming for his second consecutive win. Earlier, he had some problems back in the pits, and Steve was there.
I was there, David. An alert crewman found a burned crankshaft in the engine, rendering that engine useless. They have now plugged in a spare power plant. They at least had a chance to warm the engine up before bringing it to the line, but it is still going to be an unknown quantity going into this final.
We talked about the amount of work that goes on, and there's a perfect example. They had the car running, they changed engines, and still made it to the finals against Trip Shoemake in the Ford EXP of Billy Meyer. Kenny Bernstein will be in the near lane.
Trip Shoemake in the far lane. He has one national event win to his credit. Bernstein has won 2 over his years of drag racing.
The LN7 of Kenny Bernstein with a close win in the previous round, and he's falling behind here as it is Trip Shoemake pulling ahead, and what a storybook finish it is. Trip Shoemake wins it.
He wins it wire to wire. His crew has gone nuts. It's the Team B car collecting the honors. Susie Shoemake, what a smile. Maybe a tear or two to go along with it. It's Trip Shoemake at 586, 243 miles an hour. As Bernstein's spare engine, well, they just didn't have a time to sort it out. The clutch was maybe a little off in the car, and we get another look at it.
As you can see, Trip Shoemake had no problem because as he left the starting line, Kenny Bernstein started falling behind. And at the finish line, Trip Shoemake coming out of the car, and what a joyous reaction from a driver that 2 or 3 weeks ago, I am certain, would have thought, I'll never see this day come, as here he is, the event titleist at the NHRA Winston World Finals out of Phoenix, Arizona, Trip Shoemake. From Orange County International Raceway, this is Dave McClellan for Steve Evans saying so long for now.